Okay, I'm calling to order the Planning Advisory Commission meeting for March 16th, 2026. Call to order, so roll call, please.
Jeff Carey.
Here.
Bill Stargard.
Here.
Sophia Johnson.
Here.
Randy Lewis.
Here.
And Cynthia is excused if she doesn't show up.
Okay, so we got quorum. Okay, next is the approval of the minutes from February 23rd's meeting. Have we had a chance to review?
Yep.
I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye. Sorry.
Oh, you made the motion. Okay, cool. Okay, next is the approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting. Any additions, corrections, removals? The agenda.
Don't think so.
Entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Been moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's opposed. Okay. Conflict of interest inquiry.
Nope.
I have none.
Nope.
Okay, none all the way around. Okay. Next meeting date is April 20th, 2026. And Amdale, you said you were gonna
I'll be gone probably.
Okay.
I might have service, but probably not.
not way in Eastern Oregon.
Not in spray.
Yeah. Okay. So then we'll flag that as, authorized meeting that you can skip.
Thank you.
Then that way it doesn't count, So, okay, so next, committee and staff updates.
I have something. So at the last meeting, I brought the discussion of the Skokomish Valley and the floodplain, and I was going to bring it to this meeting, but I am going to post one of our big, public notice signs out in the valley. And so I just wanted to give extra time for notice because we looked at all the parcels. I was going to email everybody. We don't have to notify every individual parcel, but we looked at doing so, and it's just so many. We decided to just do a large notice in addition to our normal noticing. So it'll come at the April meeting.
Okay.
Is that related to what we're talking about tonight?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Didn't make it on the agenda for tonight.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Other business of any?
No, don't think so.
Okay, moving right along, public comment. At least in the room, that's a 0. But on the Zoom, I see 2 or 3 names there. Any comment from Bruce, from Brian?
Yeah, I'm Bruce. I'm just sitting in and listening.
Okay, thank you.
I'm the environmental planner for the Skokomish Drive.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And let's see, nobody else. So with that, I'll close the public comment period and move on to the public hearing. This is for amendments to the Mason County Code Title 17-17-05.34, granting variances, the authorization of. Yeah.
Hello, Kel Rowan, Mason County Community Development. These are the staff is recommending these changes. In our development regulations, we have standard setbacks from property lines for structures, 20 feet typically for rear and side yards, and 25 feet from any access easement, road, etc. However, we allow with an administrative variance, you could get down to as low as 10 for front and rear and 5 feet for side yards under certain conditions. And we do just under a couple hundred per year. So they come in with the building permit, and we do many of them. the 20-foot side yard setback, or the 20 feet is because we're zoned for 5 acres, 2 to 5 acres, but
Right.
of course there's lots of smaller lots. And so we just want to allow for that flexibility. There have been issues for a long time, but then it did, and we've talked about as staff about requiring surveys. So currently, one of the things that Mason County does not do that other jurisdictions do is we do not require surveys to accompany your building permit application. And so we rely on the applicant to define where their property lines are. And that's what our building inspectors go off of. What, if you say your property line is here, that's where they take the measurement from. And there's typically not a problem when you're meeting that 20-foot or 25-foot setback. But when you get down to the 5 feet or even 10, there have been issues where it's become a civil matter where the property owner did not indicate exactly where the property line was. And so they get in a dispute. And there was a dispute that did go through our hearing examiner. And then I think further, I'm not sure what the full details, but where a builder built a couple of houses next, or 2 houses side by side. They had a reduced setback from the road at 10 feet. But it turned out that it was in the road right of way, which was owned by the Fawn Lake HOA. And so there was a civil dispute, et cetera. The developer did have to move the buildings back. Now that was after we had already considered wanting to require the survey. And so that just happened to be a fluke that we have a really good example of, why this is an issue. Now, in lieu of requiring a survey, we want to be able to accept a notice of affidavit that would be recorded in the auditor's office on neighboring parcels. So let's say someone wanted to reduce their garage setback to 5 feet from the property line. If they get their neighbor to sign the affidavit that they agree on where that property line is, and it gets recorded to both properties, and that's no different than what we're doing now. It's no different than what we're doing now because we're not requiring surveys, but now we can see that, yes, they reached out to the neighbor and they have that. And if they are unable to do that, or there's a dispute, we can require the survey. And so that is the request.
So that wouldn't be possible for I guess if you're talking about that easement, like a utility easement or something like that, you can't really have anyone sign off on that. So if you are in the wrong regarding that.
Right, so I did get, because this went through a SEPA review, I did get comments from PUD 1 that asked that, and this is something we would probably just put on the application for for the administrative variance. We might add to the application that, people should call is it 811? The call before you dig. And check for utilities, because as you're getting close to 5 feet or even to the right of way, you want to check to make sure that, and people should be doing that as standard practice, but just as an extra alert for folks. And so, yeah, that they would, because now if a PUD or another utility owned the property, they would be the ones that would either sign the affidavit or what have you. But if it's just an easement for the utility, it's the proper way would be the call before you dig.
Okay.
So currently, you kind of take the word of the applicant that this is where the line is?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, so the applicant has to pay for the survey, right?
Yes.
But what's the normal cost of that?
I'm not sure. I know
All over the place.
it's. I was going to say it's likely all over the place. It would depend on, if the surveyor is able to find markers, if it's in a plat, what have you.
Yeah.
But it's less expensive than a full survey of all your property lines. If it's just, hey, I just need to know this line, that's going to be less expensive than doing a property survey of all your lines.
But you'd rather do that than run into trouble later, So they actually had to move the actual building?
They physically had to move the buildings back 10 feet, yeah. Or I'm not sure how far back, but they were just over the line, so I'm assuming it was 10 feet.
So this will just be a requirement if there is a variance.
Yes.
applied for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're meeting the standard 20-foot and 25-foot setback, we're not going to require either the affidavit or the survey. 'Cause
Which
then
used
that's where
to,
the-
used to the problems of the Flat of Allen that there, we actually put in the code to at least have a survey. You know,
Yeah.
somewhere in there, at least one.
Yes.
You know, 1 or 2 lines of the 4 lines. So that, because over and over again, there were so many homes early on that were off center.
Yeah.
I mean, significantly off center.
Yeah.
So. Okay, any other questions for staff? I have one question. So like, okay, so like the way you describe it's like the rural lands where you got the, 5 acres or whatever. So like when you get into plats, but not in UGAs, say like the Plat of Detroit or.
Yep.
Does the county still run with the same numbers as far as the depths and?
Yeah, we do. And that's why we have the administrative variance process, because we recognize after growth management and
Right,
doing the RR5, that there are many lots that are much,
Right,
they're
right.
small, they're in
Yeah.
flats that predate growth management.
right. Any other questions for staff?
Who does the approval? Is that you guys?
It's the permit planner who's reviewing the building permit or what it's coming on. They
Oh.
administratively approve it. And then if someone were to appeal it, so let's say, and this has come up before in the past, we had an appeal several years ago. I think out at the Mason Lake area, a staff person, I think in this case, they'd actually denied the administrative variance, but and the person appealed, I can't remember how it went, but if the planner approves or denies it, it can be appealed to our hearing examiner.
So there's a guy, that's his job, is to approve or disapprove. these.
Yep, we have 3 permit planners
Okay.
that do all of the permits that come in for the county. They have, so one planner has all the Tahuya and Western
Oh, okay.
County, and someone has kind of that middle of where the bulk of, the Shelton to Belfair area, and then someone else has
Okay.
kind of South County.
And they have to look at like a couple hundred years, sounds like.
What's that? Yes, yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you. And we'll
Yeah, no problem.
proceed and keep proceeding along.
Mhm.
Okay, so next is public comment. We have nobody in the audience. Anybody on Zoom wish to comment about the matter before us, which is the adopting changes to the process of variances to Title 17-17, so on and so forth. Not hearing any. Okay. Okay, back to deliberations. Personally, I think you need it.
I think it's good.
Hopefully, what now? I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, the only thing I was gonna say is like, on the agreements, like when I had an attorney work on easements there in the Plat of Allen, he was saying that, that you want the full legal description, not abbreviated. So I don't know if you want that as a requirement, like, in this agreement.
No, we would not be asking for full legal description. We would just be requesting that the line, so if your structure is getting, say, to the side yard property line,
Right,
we'd want that surveyed and staked.
right,
So then when the inspectors ultimately go out for their first inspection, they can see a surveyed flag of where that middle property line is, or the front or rear, or wherever it is. So we would not be requesting a full legal description.
okay. Cause I know like an easement, it's only like in a portion of the parcel, but for some reason there, legally, when you go after the easements, you have to, at least what that attorney is telling me is, have the full legal, no longer abbreviated legal. Still, a lot of people do abbreviated legals, but he gave me a reference, some time ago. Of course, a lot of this came, through the Plat of Allen, and being all its opportunities. So, is that something, I mean, is staff would consider, or members here would consider, you know, adding that to that, you know, making it full legal, you know, description instead of just a parcel number?
I mean,
Guess I'm not
yeah,
I'm not understanding how it's relevant to the reduced setback to the property line.
It's not, it's in your document at the end there, of the material you provided us.
I think the thing is they're going off of the surveyor's meets and bounds
No,
description.
no, I,
But then they're just stating
but
it
no,
out.
and it has nothing, it doesn't matter to staff and all this. This is like when other people buy the property and they look and it's recorded the full legal to the parcel.
Uh-huh.
So it's on the title.
But what would be on title?
Okay, so he's talking about the affidavit
Yes,
of agreement.
Oh.
So this is
I'm sorry.
in lieu of a survey.
Yes.
So rather than someone getting the survey, we'd say, go to your neighbor. You guys are just
Right.
agreeing that the property line. So there would be a site plan associated with the reduced setback.
Right.
So it would just show, hey, this parcel, and that's why we're just asking for the parcel numbers.
Okay.
And then the site plan would show my garage, house, what have you.
Yeah, no, I get
On the
that.
site plan. So we're not asking for legal, because then that's an added, then it's like, you know, then what's in lieu of, because now you're required, you know, most people are not able to write
No, I agree.
full legal descriptions of their property
I-
without hiring.
I'm familiar with that, what
Yeah,
happens.
I see what you mean.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
Not only can I write it, I don't really understand them.
Well, some are easy, but others are like,
Yeah, and so I don't think for staff,
I just don't want to have the county have more legal issues down the road. That's all I was,
yeah,
but I mean, obviously this is gonna be better than what you have.
than what we,
I mean,
right,
does that get uploaded to the
yes.
county? Terry's
It
county?
would, this would be recorded with the auditor's office, and it would go to, say, the person applying for it plus the neighboring property.
Okay.
So it goes to runs with the property.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's the biggest thing is that it runs with the property so that whatever happens down the road, it's like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if the neighbors are cool with the boundary that the applicant has defined, you don't need a survey, right?
Correct.
So my
You need
question-
This.
Right,
Yeah.
but my
Yep.
question is, does the neighbor have any say, like, yeah, I agree with the boundary, but I don't want their house 5 feet from my property line, or did it?
Unfortunately, no. I mean, they can complain about it and they could appeal it. But if they meet the criteria, which typically when we approve those administrative variances, they do.
Okay,
And, so yeah, I mean, people don't like a lot being developed next to them. They didn't purchase it, but they don't want anyone to develop on it. And so, you know, they can complain about that, and they do. But
Yeah,
unfortunately,
they do.
you know, as we march forward and progress and grow in population and development, it just is the way it is.
I have one other question, just kind of when I think about it. When I was reading the granting of variances, so like one section was dealing with front and rear yards, and I would have thought most paragraphs, other than referencing sides and versus front and back, would be relatively the same structure, the same. This one talks about the rural residential ones, and the other one doesn't. Like subchapter C doesn't even reference anything dealing with rural residential, whereas in subchapter D, which is the side yard ones, it does reference the rural residential, 2.5, 5, 10, and 20. I'm just curious why that would be that way. So,
We also have a hand up on Zoom.
okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
You're talking about between B and C?
No, between C and D.
Oh, C and D. Okay, I was like,
Yeah, I don't
well,
know.
those are different things. Okay, sorry, apologize for that.
Please,
Okay.
come nuts.
And what can you tell? Oh, I see. This one says, okay, that our parcel is designated. You know, that's a good question. We only apply it to the residential, and you could see I have a note on the side. It's pretty,
Oh, I couldn't,
about, you know, if we wanted to consider for the commercial and industrial properties,
right,
which we didn't
Right.
entertain.
right.
But we do only apply it to the residential. And so I don't know if that's just something we've always overlooked and never thought about it because we've just been applying, you know, we
Yeah,
always apply it the same way.
you think we should sync them up?
I was gonna, yeah,
Unless there's something, if there's something that's, you know.
just say, I don't know, how about we can all, so then I could have some time to like really read it through and can see if
Sure.
there is a
Yeah,
difference
yeah,
or not. And then at the end, we can circle back. I obviously
Yeah.
you probably want to
Right.
take Bruce's comments, but since there's not a lot of public, I think we could come back to this at the end of the presentation.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bruce, go ahead. Your hands up.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that my assumptions are correct, that when we talk about setbacks, you're not talking about any kind of a variance on buffers for critical areas or say stream buffers or something like that.
That is correct. This is just assuming no critical areas, shorelines, et cetera, exist. It's just from the property line. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. I just wanted to make sure that my assumption was correct.
Yep, that is true. Those other variances would be variances that would go through a hearing examiner system. Yeah, process with public notice.
Right.
You might also want to consider some kind of a clause where you do allow setbacks to not to kind of have people assume liability, I mean, just so that the county isn't later liable for damages if somebody say pulls out a survey after the fact and you find out the property lines are different. I don't think you want the county on the line on that.
Yeah, we are not. It is a civil matter.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
That's all.
That's it? Okay. Thank you, Bruce. Anything else?
We're still deliberating. Personally, I'm okay with it. It sounds logical and all that.
I concur. Yeah, that's how I feel.
Okay, so, and how did you say you wanted to handle this? I'm, of course I don't vote, so.
Yeah, you can continue it to the end of tonight's presentation, the resource ordinance variance, and then we'll just come back to it once you guys are done talking, or once Marissa is done. And then I can come back and say, hey, this is what I found, and I will make a recommendation on the piece about the RR5.
So we would hold off on voting anything at this point. So does that mean I would, table or hold on the public hearing, sir? How do I address that?
Say we continue it until after.
Yeah, entertain a motion to continue this public hearing after the completion of the workshop.
We'll make a motion to continue this hearing after the completion of the workshop.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for picking that up. Yeah. Next item is presentation, the resource ordinance periodic update, staff presentation. You ready?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. Just making sure everybody put the. Okay, so Marissa Watson, Mason County, we don't have a lot of stuff for tonight, so I was expecting more, but so tonight, it's not work session, it's just presentation on background and what were the mandate from the state, as well as some best available science from Department of Fish and Wildlife, some background on that. So this is actually a continuation of our audit review required by the Washington State Code Management Act. We started that review back in 2024 with the comprehensive plan. And then you guys all know that the comprehensive plan was adopted in December by the board. The GMA also requires counties and cities to review their development regulations for consistency with that comp plan, as well as any new mandates in the state. Our development regulations regarding natural resource lands and critical areas are contained within the Mason County Resource Ordinance, and that's located in Title 8, Chapter 8.52, which is the topic of this presentation. Additional development regulations are within the Mason County Zoning Code, and review and amendments to those various sections of that part of the code are forthcoming. The periodic review cycle is now every 10 years. The last time that the resource ordinance was updated was in 2020. And that was along with our periodic update of the Shoreline Master Program.
So what year?
2021.
Yeah.
So that was the SMP. That was when the SMP was required to be updated. And we opened our resource ordinance. Sorry, I call it the RO. So if you hear me say RO, that's resource ordinance. It wasn't exactly necessary to open the resource ordinance. The staff had several recommendations, and the resource ordinance and the SMP overlap in a lot of areas, so it made sense to open both of them. And then during that review time, we also incorporated review of Commerce's critical areas checklist as well to make sure if there were any other mandated requirements, we also looked at that back in 2021. So that checklist was included in your packet for tonight. So we used that back in 2021, and we're using it now as well. So that checklist serves as guidance for review of state mandates as well as best available science. And because we utilized that checklist back in our 2020 review, there's relatively few required updates. The biggest addition between that time and now is material from the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife that continues to develop science around stream and river riparian ecosystems and healthy habitat for fish and other aquatic species. So we'll talk about that a little bit more at the later on in the presentation. Staff originally filled this checklist out back in fall of 2024, and the answers in that checklist are still relevant. We did bring this to the PAC back in September of 2024 as well. And originally the intention was to run the review of it concurrently with the comp plan, or at least as close as possible. But because there were a lot of updates to the comp plan, we put that on hold so we could make sure that the comp plan got through the PAC as well as Department of Commerce without having any issues that would require us to go back and update that resource, our recommendations for the resource order. So now we're reviewing it. I also want to note that we have had a resource ordinance protecting natural resources in critical areas as early as 1993. And between that time and now, it has gone through several revisions in order to keep up with GMA and local. The document that the PAC received for tonight's meeting is also on the county website under our 2025 comprehensive plan update page. If you go to the meeting information and page and click on that clickable date, you will find a link to the document. So if anybody needs to go and reference that document again, it's in that section of our website. The document is titled Resource Ordinance Periodic Review, EAF Review and Code Analysis. The first section of that document that you all have is basically a high-level summary of Fish and Wildlife policy and regulatory recommendations. And I've also provided a link to their original volume that they produced if anyone is wanting to take on some heavier reads. So volume 1 is actually where the science and synthesis of that science is, and then volume 2 is their policy and regulatory recommendations. So again, we'll look at that a little bit more here later. The second half of that document provides staff draft summary of our code analysis, which identifies areas of the resource ordinance to be reviewed and updated as needed based on best available science and GMA mandates, as well as areas that staff has identified for clarification, consolidation, and consistency. We are still incorporating some of the recommendations within the actual draft. That's why you don't have it tonight. So the draft with the summary that you have is an initial idea of what we're looking at. So there may be additional recommendations coming from staff once we hear from the public and you guys as well. And we'll make sure once we have the draft ready that it's going out to our notification as well as the tribes and state agencies as well. Some background on our Growth Management Act mandate. So RCW 3670A, this is referenced a lot, requires local governments to implement regulations that protect natural resource lands in critical areas. Natural resource lands include agricultural lands for food production, forest lands for timber, and mineral resource lands for mineral extraction. And this is as long as they are not already characterized by urban growth and have long-term commitment. The law also requires us to protect critical areas defined in that same RCW. Those include currently wetlands, critical aquifer areas, fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas, frequently flooded areas, and geologically hazardous areas. So across all critical areas, local government must, with their ordinance, designate critical areas within the jurisdiction and define that critical area. The ordinance must adopt development regulations protecting the function and value and must consider best available science in the process of drafting those protections. The goal of any version of this ordinance should be no net loss of function and value. I'm going to quickly go over what the requirements are for those critical areas. Or as quick as I can. So under Washington state law, specifically the same RCW 3670, 30, section 48, definition of wetlands are areas saturated by water, either on the surface or underground that support plants or aquatic life adapted to conditions. To identify and map these areas, we use the Federal Wetland Delineation Manual and regional supplements, which provides consistent scientific guidance. Once a wetland is identified, protections including establishing buffers, which are areas around the wetland that help preserve its ecological function. The size of these buffers depend on factors like habitat value, water quality benefits, and potential impact from surrounding land use. When planning development, the first step is always avoidance, preventing impacts where possible. The impacts cannot be avoided. There are mitigation strategies that are considered. Mitigation can occur on-site, off-site, or through something called mitigation banks, which are basically pre-established wetland projects that provide credits for unavoidable impacts that would result as part of a development proposal. In short, wetland protection is a careful process. First, we identify, then protect, and finally, if needed, we mitigate, ensuring both ecological function and legal compliance are maintained. Then we have critical aquifer recharge areas, often called CARs. These are areas that play a key role in replenishing groundwater. Protecting these areas helps maintain both function and long-term value. which are essential sources of drinking water for many communities. Under RCW, local governments are required to identify and protect CARs because they supply or recharge groundwater used for public water systems. The goal is to safeguard both the quality and quantity. The protection measures typically include prohibiting or strictly regulating hazardous land uses in those areas, such as involving toxic chemicals, fuel storage, or other contaminants that could seep into the groundwater. Communities also work to protect the wellhead areas, which are zones surrounding public drinking water, where there is a high risk of contamination. Other important strategies is limiting impervious surfaces, such as large paved areas or dense development. Reducing these surfaces helps decrease stormwater runoff and increase natural infiltration, allowing rainwater to soak into the ground and recharge the aquifer rather than carrying the pollutants into the waterway. Together, these measures help ensure that aquifers remain clean, sustainable, and capable of supplying safe drinking water. The next area is our frequently flooded areas. Our locations that have a high risk of flooding, and they are identified using guidance from FEMA and the Washington State Department of Ecology. Under the RCW, local governments must designate and protect these areas as part of critical areas regulations. The purpose of regulating these areas is to protect natural functions and values of floodplains, while also safeguarding the public from hazards, health, and safety. These areas help store and slow floodwaters, reduce erosion, and provide important habitat. At the same time, development in these areas can place people and property at risk. To address this, we have regulations that may require flood-proofing structures, such as elevating buildings above the base flood elevation, or applying other construction standards. In some cases, development may be prohibited altogether, such as in mapped floodways. In Mason County, we also implement the performance standards associated with the National Flood Insurance Program biological opinion. This means that on a permit-by-permit basis, the county evaluates whether proposed development or other permitted actions could have an adverse effect on federally listed species or their habitat. This ensures that floodplain management not only reduces flood risk, but also protects important ecological resources. Though our resource ordinance contains a section called frequently flooded areas, the majority of the county's regulations on this topic are located in the flood damage prevention ordinance, and that's in Title 14. So that's where most of the information on floodplains is going to be and development of floodplains. The next section is geologically hazardous areas. These are areas that may be unsafe for development due to natural geological conditions. They are defined as areas susceptible to erosion, landslides, earthquakes, or other geological events that could pose a risk to people's property or the environment. Because of these risks, local regulations require us to have a qualified or have the applicant a qualified professional, such as a licensed geologist or geotechnical engineer, to evaluate sites for development. These professionals prepare geotechnical reports or stability assessments that examines the condition of slopes and soils and determines how a proposed project could affect site stability. Based on that analysis, the report may recommend measures to reduce or mitigate hazards. Common measures include establishing setbacks from steep slopes, maintaining intact vegetation, and designing stormwater systems to prevent excess water from destabilizing slopes. In some cases, projects may require structural reinforcement or specialized engineering. Under Washington's Critical Areas Framework, geologically hazardous areas generally include locations with erosion, seismic hazards, channel migration zones, and areas prone to massive least and landslides. Identifying and carefully managing development in those areas helps reduce risk to public safety by protecting the landscape. Fish and wildlife habitat conservation area. Under Washington Administrative Code, there's 365, 190, 30. These are defined as areas that are important for maintaining fish and wildlife populations and the ecosystems they depend on. These areas may include habitats for priority species, endangered or threatened species, breeding or feeding areas, migration corridors, and important seasonal habitats. The goal of these regulations is to protect the functions and values of these habitats so that fish and wildlife populations can remain healthy and sustainable. Under the RCW, local governments are required to consider best available science in developing and updating protection. As part of that process, regulations may be updated to reflect current state and federal species listings, including species listed under the Endangered Species Act of 1973, and those identified by the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife as priority species or habitats. Best available science is also used to identify and protect biodiversity areas and habitat corridors, which allow wildlife to move between habitats and maintain genetic diversity. One example of science using these regulations comes from the Riparian Ecosystems, Volume 1 and Volume 2, that Fish and Wildlife has put out. The management recommendations has guidance that recommends a 200-year site potential tree height to help determine the appropriate width of a riparian management zone. This method estimates how tall trees could grow over time at a specific site and uses that information to establish buffers that protect streams, support habitat, and maintain long-term ecosystem function. Under Washington state law, the formation of critical areas regulations must be guided, like we mentioned before, by best available science. Specifically, the WACs listed there require that local governments use it when identifying and protecting critical areas, ensuring that regulations are scientifically grounded and effective. So the rules also define what qualifies as best available science, and some of the documentation includes peer-reviewed research, scientific reports, monitoring data, and agency guidance. Additionally, the WAC allows jurisdictions to rely on guidance prepared by state and federal agencies, which includes documents such as those listed before the Riparian Ecosystems Volume 1 and 2 documentation, published by Fish and Wildlife. These resources provide detailed scientific information on riparian functions, habitat, and management approaches. While BAS provides the foundation for regulations, jurisdictions may adopt deviations based on local conditions, including economic, social, or practical considerations. When such deviations are made, though, they must be clearly documented, including the rationale for the adjustment and how it aligns with the overall goals of protecting the critical areas and maintaining ecological function. This approach ensures that regulations are both scientifically informed and locally appropriate. Now let's talk a little bit about our RMCs. The document staff provided with tonight includes diagrams from Fish and Wildlife's volumes that they drafted. They provide a good visual of the areas under discussion. RMCs, these are what Fish and Wildlife calls transitional areas, thinking land and water ecosystems. They play a critical role in ecological health. And the main goal of RMCs is to protect existing riparian ecosystems and restore created function. So they provide key benefits, maintaining water quality, supporting habitat connectivity for fish and wildlife, while supplying large debris, offering shade, and controlling sediment. CFW's recommendation base RMC width on that 200-year potential tree height. But where trees are short, A minimum of 100 feet is recommended for effective pollution removal. And there's more information on this in the staff report as well as Fish and Wildlife volume. So this is the diagram I'm talking about. So this is a diagram, I believe, for volume 1. It's explained in more detail in the volume and staff report. The goal of ground riparian management would be to create desired future conditions for a fully functioning riparian ecosystem, measured by 5 key ecological functions, which are the stability of bank, shade, pollution removal, contributions of vegetable, I don't know, something like nutrients, and recruitment of large the VAS emphasizes that fish and other aquatic species benefit most from riparian areas that have a historical range of natural variability. This includes limiting the impact of development, which may affect habitat border connectivity, as well as altering the natural variability of stream reaches caused by natural occurrences such as landslides, fire, and flooding, for example. And Fish and Wildlife has put together a mapping tool. So I'll post this presentation on our project page, and the links will be accessible to on there. So within that tool, they define height at 100 years, and it has the following description. So it says that Fish and Wildlife derive the site potential tree height values from forest productivity site index information using natural resource conservation services soil data, and it's soil data viewer. And so that's a tool for our GIS. The NRCS provided forest productivity site index values feet for 50 years for Western Washington, and then typically 100 years in Eastern Washington. And then it says Fish and Wildlife determined the site potential tree height at 200 years using tree site index equations. And I believe the equations may be in that volume 1 that I mentioned earlier. The only thing that the image on the right, so that's the one on the right there with the blue and yellow lines. What it doesn't depict is that there are many parcels that overlay all of those the streams in blue and the soil polygons depicted in the yellow. So this is just a small section of them part of the county. And then those soil polygons represent different tree species with different tree heights that they would achieve at a 200-year mark. So the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife also has several recommended comparison, recommending riparian ecosystems be designated as a critical area. Currently, the RCW does not list that as a critical area, but they are recommending that. Second, that watershed scale strategies like stormwater controls and fish passable culvert should be incorporated. And that RMDs be delineated using reference features such as the ordinary high water mark or the channel migration zone. And that list reflects the site-specific conditions as we discussed in the last slide. Protections should apply to all streams, and adaptive management programs should monitor effectiveness. And then finally, terrestrial species habitat needs must also be considered in the planning. And so I want to mention, especially for those that are not familiar with the resource ordinance, that Macon County already incorporates some of these recommendations in some form or other. And in the staff report, there's also a list of other recommendations, additional recommendations that they have in their volume 2 that I just didn't follow. And then some activities within RMD may not require permits, but minimizing disturbance and preparing habitat management plans is strongly recommended on a larger scale water watershed management like stormwater control, connectivity improvements, and climate adaptation is essential. Adaptive management can be critical as well. It allows monitoring of our implementation of the regulations and evaluating effectiveness and validating broader outcomes, like the regional outcomes of regulating on a parcel by parcel basis and in the watershed overall. Overall, these practices ensure compliance with the Growth Management Act, protect fish and wildlife habitat, conservation areas, and maintain healthy, responsible riparian users. So the county works to designate and protect waters of the state and management fisheries, which helps preserve important aquatic habitats and maintain water quality for fish species that migrate between the ocean and freshwater. Another key element is reasonable use exceptions. These are allowances for variance in situations where critical areas ordinance would otherwise deny property attain reasonable use of land. So we have regulations within our resource ordinance that provide reasonable use in case parcels are encumbered significantly. So this helps us to ensure balance between environmental protection and property rights. We also, in the critical areas ordinance, the resource ordinance, we also address agricultural activities through the voluntary stewardship program, which encourages farmers to protect critical areas while continuing agricultural production. And finally, the county must follow forest practice application regulations, which guide forestry activities to ensure they protect water resources and surrounding ecosystems. In addition to regulations, the county is trying to strengthen non-regulatory efforts, particularly monitoring mitigation, habitat management, and restoration plans. Improving permitting software will make it easier to track those efforts and ensure compliance. Currently, we don't have a formal adaptive management system in place, and moving forward, we may need to establish clear monitoring parameters and performance standards. And this concludes the presentation. In the future here, next steps are first draft resource ordinance and staff report with any public comment. Our staff report with the rationale for our recommendations would be the next step. And I'm looking at April, May for work session. That would be the next step with staff's recommendations, and possibly May to June for public hearing. We may take a pause after the work session so staff can work more on the development regulations, so we can bring both the development regulations to the zoning code, so we can bring both kind of at the same time. So we can do a SEPA that encompasses all the resource ordinance as well as development regulations. So I will end the presentation there, and if the PAC has any questions, And if you don't have any questions, that's fine right now. This is really background, like what's required and what we have to look at, which is the best deal design for fish and wildlife, and what, and then the next meeting will bring this topic back, will be staff's recommendation and a rationale, and then getting your input on our recommendation. So that's the plan.
In my simple brain, seems like what you're doing is maybe updating definitions and making sure you're consistent with Washington State Code. Is that a fair statement?
Definitions and any new regulations as well as looking at best developed practices coming out of any state agency.
For the qualified scientists, that's defined somewhere.
And the WAC, the ones that I listed there, the 365, it defines what qualifies as best developed.
Okay.
And yes, it can be, work that comes out of state agencies, so.
Can I make a recommendation? Too many acronyms.
I know.
Well, no, but I wondered, which is fine. But for geezer like me, I've got to, oh, what was that again? I had to go back, but maybe you still have a page with the acronyms and the definitions that you got in there. That might. I did have one question. Who decides what, here's some land, who decides if it's a wetland or not? How is that determined?
For the permitting process, our planners, they all know enough to know whether or not that's a wetland.
Uh-huh.
But well, we had an exception, but they are not wetland biologists. We don't have wetland biologists on staff or any biologists on staff. So we require that the applicant hire a specialist, and that's defined by our code who qualifies. And then they have to meet they have to go through the wetland criteria. We use Department of Ecology's manual. It's the state manual for Western Washington on. So they delineate the wetland, like where does it actually exist, and then they categorize the wetland, and then with that and its habitat score, then our code determines what the buffer is. So it's staff is the one, planning staff are the ones that will make the requirement on if a property owner has to hire a wetland biologist to do that work.
So there's all this stuff for the county. Does that apply to inside the city, or is that a different jurisdiction?
That city has their own.
Okay.
Yep, they have their own they call it a critical areas ordinance, and their staff has authority over that.
I know Bruce has his hand up. On the Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bruce has his hand up.
I was reading and so I hear part of the words. Yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that Fish and Wildlife, Washington State Fish and Wildlife does a really good job of basing things on science. They're actually looked to by other authorities as very up to state of the art. And one of the thoughts I have is you might want to also explain to people the benefits. I know people complain about the cost of fish passage, opening up fish passage, but the fish are actually what's feeding the forests, and forest resource land is just so critical to Mason County and the whole culture. So I think if people understand that managing the ecology has benefits, it helps understand why we need to go through all this. So I would just suggest that these ideas from Fish and Wildlife are not just haphazard. They're not, they don't really represent the kind of political ulterior motives that you often run into. It really is based a lot on science. And then, of course, Mason County has to figure out how that applies best in its context. But, and I'm not an authority or the tribe. I'm not saying these things as the official position of the tribe. So I'm just, sharing what I think is generally true. And I think a lot of people at the tribe would agree. But that's not a position. So not a formal position, at least.
Okay. Well, thank you for staying. Anything else?
Well, I would also point out that actually one thing that the tribe would like to see is, best efforts to open up fish passage, of course, because fisheries is so vital to the culture and the economy.
Okay, well, thank you. Any other questions for staff?
I just wanted to mention, Yeah, the reason I mentioned asked about the Scope Valley earlier. Looks like there's a frequently flooded areas section, so they must have their own special set of rules or. It's frequently.
The Skokomish River Valley is the most flooded area of Western Washington, actually of all of Washington State. So yes, it is frequently flooded, and I know just recently they had to do emergency repairs and stuff on dikes. Happens a lot.
Question for staff. In your section 2, where it says Mason County Code Analysis, we have these different sections where you have your code section title, and all that. I noticed there was nothing under the critical areas recharge.
Mhm.
Was there nothing to update?
Yeah, there was nothing.
Okay. Everything else seemed to be following the pattern. I'm a pattern guy.
Yeah, if it's not in the, I mean, and the checklist too that I filled out from commerce.
Right.
I addressed that, like, said yes or no, whether we didn't
Okay.
update and
I didn't connect the two.
stuff, yeah. So if it wasn't, yes, if it wasn't, listed in there, we have not identified it as needing an update. So, granted, we may have comments from agencies or something
Right.
that may update that
Right. But I mean, at least to this point.
to this point.
Okay, thank you.
Seems like you've already done a lot of work and gotten comments from, is that the state, somebody in the state that you're responding to?
Washington Department of Ecology, they commented really early, or when we did that first presentation back in 2024,
Oh, okay.
they commented early. She just asked for the draft, and so looks completely fine.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff in here.
Yeah, I like what I see, and I'm excited to get more into the meat of it.
I have one last question. Sorry.
No problem. This is a,
So when you're defining these buffer zones, I guess, like in some scenarios, the zone has to be as wide as a 200-year-old tree is high. Did I get that right?
So the best available science from the FW is basing it on the site index, soil site index. So it's the potential for tree species, what the potential height is for tree species in 200 years, which is the minimum of what they consider old growth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's whatever the soil indicates would grow there, and then to the potential height at 200 years.
I thought your graphic was very interesting. Height of the tree compared to.
That's not my official wildlife. I will say that.
Well, it was still interesting.
They do get, they have.
Especially for, so like when he was an idiot and all this stuff.
okay, anything else for staff? Hearing none, we'll close that for now and look for more material. Upcoming meetings. Okay.
Now we circle back to the.
I'm gonna circle back to the public hearing. And how do I
Reopen the public hearing.
reopen the public hearing?
Okay, since we were all here at the beginning and there's no new people, I'm not going to, unless you completely forgot.
Yeah.
But let's get to it. So I did read C and D, and I could not come up with any reason on why we didn't just spell out the different zones from RR 2.5, 5, 10, 20, and rural multifamily. So staff recommendation is that for section C, so 17.05.034, section C, that I undelete that second sentence, or the second line where it says for existing lots of record. So I would put that back in.
Oh,
And
okay.
then right after for existing lots of record, I would add what is already in section D, and that is that for existing lots of record that are parcels designated as rural residential 2.5, rural residential 5, rural residential 10, rural residential 20, or rural multifamily,
Right.
and then it's the same. It goes on to
So would you also remove this
physical attribute.
in D? Would you also remove the date there also
Yeah, and we're removing the date
on both?
on both of them, yes,
Okay.
as of March 5th, 2002.
When I say removing, I meant removing the strikeout.
We are keeping the strikeout on the dates,
Okay.
yes. So originally, the idea for the date, the March 5th, 2002, is because when this administrative variance took place, it was meant for all of those lots that were platted prior or subdivided in any way,
Right.
prior to these regulations, the new regulations of, at least a minimum of 2-acre lots. And so we thought, oh, well, when they get divided in the future, they'll all easily be able to meet those 20 feet, 25 feet. And we have found, because we are steep slopes and wetlands, and most properties are on septic systems that can sometimes only go in a particular area, we find that there are lots of lots that were platted after 2002, because during the subdivision process, we don't make people figure out where exactly where your septic is going to go and your well and all of those pieces. And so since then so we have approved administrative variances for lots that were subdivided after March 5th. So we're just removing that piece there.
Okay, so we're removing still keeping with the strikeouts of the dates.
Yep.
But basically adding, what are we adding?
Well, on section C, it strikes out for existing lots of record.
Right.
But if you look down on section D,
yeah,
I did not strike for existing lots of record. And so I'm just adding in section C, because I'm going to be adding the residential 5. Right. I'm just saying for existing lots of record that are designated as those things. So I'll be making them the same.
Got it. Okay.
So, sorry, just a little confused. Some of us are slower than others, but for a commercial project, is there a process there to define, these limits?
So for the commercial projects, each commercial zone has different setbacks, and we determined that it's not something that comes up very often. We're not faced with this. We do not have administrative variances on commercial lots. They would go through a development regulation variance, and we process those very, very rarely, like not even one in a year. I have no personal experience with going through a variance process for a commercial property, so we did not consider it in this process.
So if there's a neighbor of that's cool, thank you.
What if? Okay. We've deliberated. Any other thoughts, impact members?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Well, I'll entertain a motion.
I move we adjourn. Oh, is that what you're wanting?
No.
Are you gonna make recommendations?
Yeah, we're gonna make a recommendation.
Sorry,
We're still in it, so I'm gonna close the public hearing.
no, my mistake.
Okay,
Like I said, some of us are
We're all
slower.
there. We're all
Some
there.
are slower than others.
we're there. So I gotta close the public hearing, right? So close the public hearing, and now back to deliberations possessed. And entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the we were just talking about.
A little bit, a little finer that.
Yes. So do you wanna amend your,
What should I say exactly for this to be specific?
They recommend approval as amended.
And I'm going to move to recommend the approval as amended.
That's, motion's made.
second?
One question.
Yeah.
That, we don't have to address what Al brought up, right? Separate,
That's the amendment.
because these, to me, these are all amendments that we're doing to the whole code.
Mhm.
That's why I just want to make sure.
Okay.
No problem.
So you can. Or
Yeah.
no, you can say with corrections as discussed. If you wanted to.
With corrections as discussed.
I amend my motion to include the corrections as discussed.
Second.
A second. Any further discussion?
We're getting the hang of it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those, nobody opposed. Okay, motion passes. And now I entertain your motion.
I've already humiliated myself.
No, yeah, make the motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Move a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.